This is Malcolm Reese with TPNewsRoom.com. News, commentary, opinion. And today I want to talk about something simple, the truth and how we lost it. See, the Truth Project didn't start out as commentary or politics. It started because of two films I worked on, The Hello Girls and The 6888. Both of those projects were built on one thing, telling stories the country forgot. No spin, no performance, just the truth. And it feels like somewhere along the way that changed. There was a time you could read the newspaper, get the facts, and actually trust them. You didn't have to question every single line. Now, every headline feels like a test. You see something and you immediately think AI. Is that real? Or is it something or somebody playing with my emotions again? And that's really why we wrote this ripple effect piece, because we wanted to know, how did we get here? When did news stop being about information and start being about reaction? You can trace it back to 1987. Ronald Reagan's administration killed something called the Fairness Doctrine. It's the rule that said if you held a broadcast license, you had to show both sides of controversial issues. You couldn't just run one narrative all day long. You had to present balance. When they took that rule away, it was like taking the referee off the field. Overnight, talk radio blew up, polarization exploded, and the news stopped being about public service and turned into an emotional sport. And once people could choose their version of the truth, Republicans watching one feed, Democrats another, the idea of a shared reality started slipping. Not all at once, quietly, one headline at a time. And now, today, we live in a world that looks informed, but feels lost. Think about it. Everybody's shouting, but no one's actually listening. Everybody knows things, even when they don't. And honestly, most people don't want truth. They want comfort. See, truth makes you think. Comfort lets you sleep. And the internet figured that out. Algorithms feed you whatever keeps you emotional, angry, scared, validated, because emotion keeps you scrolling, but emotions make terrible detectives. When you're mad, you don't check sources. When you're validated, you don't question anything. You just run with it because it feels familiar. And sometimes that something, that familiar, it becomes memory. And memory becomes truth. And that's how misinformation wins. Not because it's believable, but because it's relentless. And to that point, yesterday I was having a discussion about bonds with a very, very good friend of mine. I only talked to a few people, and he's one of the few people I actually talk to regularly. But it was about treasury bonds, the dollar, currency, all of it. And he asked me if I understood bond currency and why countries go into debt and how they go into debt. I said, of course I do. We just did articles on it. So he goes into his rant, explaining the views, and I stop him. I said, you're wrong. I remember that part clearly. I said, that's not true. Where did you get your information? He said he watched a documentary on it. And I said, okay, where did that documentary get its information? Because here's the problem. I've done multiple documentaries on that exact subject. Matter of fact, we published one last week in our paper, The Truth Project, TPNewsRoom.com. And everything he told me was surface level facts without the backbone or depth. They were real things, yes, but they were misconstrued, out of order, missing some context. And then he asked a real question, and it was actually a fair one. He said, what makes your facts different than my facts? What makes your facts different than my facts? And he's right. Today, anybody can make a documentary, post it online, put dramatic music behind it, and suddenly they're an expert. But the difference, the one thing I do, the one thing we do at the Truth Project is AP style citation, real sourcing. We go to .govs, .orgs, and long-standing white-listed news organizations like the Post, the Times, institutions that have existed for 100 years and still have a North Star for accuracy to a point. Even if the Fairness Doctrine is wrong, they have some semblance of trying to be balanced. See, you can't cherry pick convenience and call it truth. You can't Google your way into credibility. Facts are not vibes. And the bigger point is this: everything is skewed now. Even simple conversation with your friends, people you trust, can turn into two completely different realities. And that's exactly why truth feels endangered. But it's bigger than media. This thing has leaked into everything: work, politics, friendships, family. People don't debate ideas anymore. They debate reality. Two people can watch the same event and walk away with two different versions of what happened. Not because they're blind, but because they've been conditioned. And I see it in real life. My 4-year-old loses a bet with his sister and reacts like most adults online. Angry, excuses, denial, anything but admitting he lost. Now, we laugh when a kid does it, but adults do the same thing every day with politics. They protect their identity instead of protecting the truth. And that's how we got here. A word fluent in noise but illiterate in meaning. A world where people think they're being informed when they're really just being entertained. But here's the part that matters. Fixing this doesn't start with institutions. It starts with us. With checking facts even when it's inconvenient. With listening before we argue. With saying, I don't know instead of pretending we do. With admitting we got something wrong. Not because we lost, but because we learned. Truth isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't trending. Truth is steady. And we lost that somewhere along the way. And look, just to be transparent, the Truth Project was a name I came up with back in 2017, long before I knew there was a big Christian organization using the same title. I wasn't trying to copy anything or stand in anybody else's lane. I just needed a name that matched the North Star I always had: finding what's real and telling it clean. That's why I built out TPNewsRoom. That's why I keep going. Because the mission didn't change, but it seems like the world around it has. So if the Truth Project exists for anything, it's for this: to remind people to question again, to pause, to think, to look for what's real, not what's comfortable. Because the moment you stop thinking for yourself, somebody else starts thinking for you.